Oh, my phone, yeah.
David, I'm alcoholic. Happy to be here. Uh, Gee whiz. I was at a meeting recently and somebody claimed he saw a bumper sticker. So somewhere out in the middle, somewhere in America, there's a bumper sticker that says, "We recover out loud so that others don't suffer in silence or don't die in silence." I can't remember which. So we recover out loud so that others don't die in silence. So I'm going to be scribbling outside the lines a little bit tonight uh, because it's my story. It's just the way it is. I was born in Michigan, a little town called Traverse City. It's way up near the top of Michigan. And when I graduated high school, there were 30,000 permanent residents in the entire county. About 10,000 people living in the city and 20,000 of us living out in the sticks. And really small town. It's a nice little town. History includes logging, farming, and most recently tourism. When I was born, the economy was about half agricultural and half tourism. And in the years since, it's been all they do is tourism now. So every year we'd have this thing called the Cherry Festival. It's 2 weeks, ending on the 4th of July. The 4th of July is the last day of the festival. And so for 2 weeks out of the year, our little town of 30,000 people would grow to 100,000. And so it got to the point where you couldn't go downtown and walk around because all the fudgies were getting in the way. The fudgies were just people who didn't live there. They came to town to eat fudge and swim in the water and take a vacation. And we called them fudgies. So it was just a rhythm in my life. There was fudgy season, there was winter, there was summer, there was fudgy season. And life was good. Life was quiet, small town America. It was a really good life. My father was an electrician in the union. Um, at one point, when I was really young, he found a piece of land way out in the sticks, built a house. Well, moved out there and started growing up. It was just another day in small town America. And I was about 8 or 9 years old, and my mother began mistreating me. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I just kept on being a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. I kept being a little boy as best I could. And life goes on. Eventually, I watched as a little boy, I watched my mother and father fall apart. I mean, they both passed on. Uh, my father when I grew up, he was always drinking. That's all I've ever known him as, was just the guy who would drink. He'd come home and drink a beer, usually PBR. Just get a can of beer. He'll drink 2 or 3 beers, and that was his evening. And I had one older sister. When she and I were real small, sometimes Dad would get these tiny little glasses and give us each a little sip of beer. And it felt special because Dad gave us something that we weren't supposed to have. We felt like we were sneaking, and it felt good. But I grew up watching those two fall apart as humans. Um, my father, I don't think he ever received a clinical diagnosis, but the family suspects that he should have been diagnosed as bipolar. And my mother had her own abuse, and she never sought treatment or never got effective treatment for it. And something I heard recently, just last week, from my friends on Wednesday night, a nice lady there named Nicole, she said that hurt people, which means that people who have been hurt go on to hurt others. Hurt people hurt people. And I'm in that line now. So by the time I was 12, there were only a couple of, I had a couple of convictions in my soul by the time I was 12. One was that I would never be allowed to get married because I'm a guy. Just that's that's the result of how I was raised. I knew absolutely that I would never get married. I would never be allowed to have children. And I knew absolutely that I would wear the nation's uniform of some kind. I didn't know exactly what. I was 12. I just knew that I was going to get out of the house, swear an oath, put on a uniform, and go away. That's what I was going to do. So when they finally divorced, right around age 13, 14, I was 14 when their divorce was finalized, and the house that my dad had built got repossessed. Among the two of them, they couldn't figure out to just sell the house and pay off the bills. They decided to fight to the bitter end, and the house got repossessed. So we packed it all into a U-Haul and moved into town. So I was 14, moved into town. I could walk to school at this point. Another crazy aspect of my life is that I was homeless 7 times during my 4 years of high school, but my parents always had the money to send us to parochial school. I went to St. Francis High School in Michigan, the same school that my father had graduated from. So traditions are carried on like that. I know I still don't understand. How do we move from house to house to house? Can't sit still, but you guys can afford tuition like this every year. But I'm in town now. We're in town now. My sister and I were, and it's that time in America when you get a house key. You're 14, you get a house key, and there aren't any cell phones. Um, you wake up Saturday morning, you leave the house. You eat something, you leave the house. See you later. And you spend the whole day wandering town, making friends, meeting people. And at age 15, there's a nice river that flows through my town. The Boardman River flows and meanders through my hometown and spills out into Lake Michigan. And there's an overpass right on the shore, and there's a walkway, a river walk. You can walk down there and go under the overpass out onto the beach. And no decent people went down there. That was a bad part of town. So of course I'm down there, and I'm walking under the bridge. There's some dude walking towards me, and he's smiling. And what's up, dude? And his name is Chuck. And he's been my best friend from that moment to this. We were 15 years old together. At 16, we got arrested together. Now that's friendship. He and my sister got together pretty quickly. She managed to graduate before she got pregnant. Kudos to her. He tried to marry her. It didn't work out, but kudos to him. He's still my brother. I don't mind what anybody has to say about Chuck. Is still my best friend and my brother. He's in Ohio now, and he's not sober. But he, that first summer we shared together, the three of us. He was somebody outside my sister and I. Her name is Lee. Lee and I had our shared trauma, our shared experience. So somebody outside the family was a godsend because we could go and have a friend. He had spent most of his life in foster care. He had been in 44 different foster homes before he finished high school. He was even fostered by my aunt and uncle at one point. We didn't know him at that time. But as I was saying, we spent the whole summer racing around and running around town together. And one day we meet up at the beach, and he says, "Dude, you guys got to go to Safeway. You gotta get a 2-liter Coke. Go get a 2-liter Coke." Okay, fine. So we get a 2-liter Coke. And we're passing this 2 liter Coke around between the three of us. Drink it down, drink it down. We dump some of it. We're so sick. We dump some of it out. And he pulls out of his backpack a bottle of Jack Daniels and dumps the whole thing in there. So we got a liter of Coke and a fifth of Jack Daniels. And the three of us are wandering up and down the beach, getting drunk as just blind drunk. And no consequences. Nothing happened at all. Just like, in fact, we didn't even finish that bottle. We took it home. We took it home. And I kept drinking it for like the next kept sipping on it for like the next 3 days. That was my first really, really big drunk. I tried marijuana 3 times in high school. I hated it. Today I still hate the smell of that stuff. I cannot stay. To me, it's like a dead skunk. It makes I feel rage when I smell it. So I hate it. But I barely graduated high school, and true to my word, I knew I was going to do. Friends of mine in high school. Crazy story. One of my best friends in high school, his father had served 2 tours in Vietnam as a Green Beret. So my circle of friends, we had a lot of veteran fathers, and we all knew we're going to go in the Army after high school, and that's what I did. 17 years old. 17 years old, I graduated high school. I started school at age 4. Was born in October, so I was allowed to start at age 4. So school starts in September, and 4 weeks later I turn of age, and so they let me join. So I finished high school at 17, and so I go down to the recruiter. I get all the paperwork together. I go home, get my mother's permission to join the Army. She had to sign the paperwork. Take it back to the recruiter, and then wait till September when my window opens up. So go to Fort Dix. I join the Army, get on the airplane, fly away. Finally, get to Fort Dix. Do basic training. I go to truck school. I learn how to drive everything the only Army owns that has a steering wheel. I'm qualified. If it has a steering wheel, I'm qualified to drive. Okay. When you join the Army, when you volunteer, you're allowed a dream sheet. You're allowed to pick 2 duty stations. Where do you want to go, Dave? My first choice was Germany because my father had been stationed there. He had served from 60 to 63. He did not go to Vietnam. He went to Europe because he volunteered. He got to pick his duty station. So anyway, I did the same thing. I went to Germany. My second choice was California. Okay, Dave, you're going to Germany. So packed up all my military stuff and I flew over to Germany. And I get to my barracks, a place called locally was known as Süd Kaserne, meaning South Kaserne. The Kaserne is basically the German word for barracks. Later on, I found out it was known locally as the Gangster Hotel. It was part of a large complex that Hitler had commissioned there in Nuremberg. If you've ever seen footage of Hitler, those giant rallies in the big Coliseum where he's ranting and raving and there's crowds of nice Nazis all saluting. That stadium, I saw Monsters of Rock in that stadium. I saw Bon Jovi there. So it was about a 15-minute walk from the barracks I'd stayed in. The barracks there was built to hold, according to legends, it was built and then it was manned by some elite Nazi guard whose only job was to protect Hitler when he came to town. So I lived there for 2 years. And I get there and go in the front desk and put down my orders. And hi, I'm Private Anderson. I'm reporting for duty. And Sergeant looked at my paperwork and he leaned over, 4 numbers. Hey, your new supply clerk is here. I'm a driver. No, you're a supply clerk. Just wait a minute. So I became the supply clerk, got all my stuff into my room, and there's the usual hazing stuff going on. Finally, someone says, all right, man, let's go downtown. Because it's peacetime. The day ends at 5 o'clock. You take off your uniform, you put on your jeans, and you go downtown. And he showed me where all the best bars were at. There was one about a 15-minute walk away from the barracks. It was owned by a guy from Greece named Jimmy. Jimmy the Greek. There it is. And he'd been there, I don't know how long he'd been there. He'd been there a long time, putting up with drunk Americans getting drunk in his bar. And German beer is not regulated as it is here in America. Here in America, we are restricted to alcohol content of 3.2%. In Germany, it's common to have 7% alcohol. And so I drank 3 beers and passed out the first time I went downtown. And somehow I got back to the barracks and realized I'd come home. And I spent 2 years there drunk. Get off work, go to the mess hall, get some chow, go back to my room, open up the wall locker, put away the uniform, get on civilian clothing, get a pack of cigarettes out of my locker, lock it all up, and go drink. Come home, come back to the barracks, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, drunk, pour myself into bed, and that was my life. And I found a couple other bars along the way that had to buy a ticket for the streetcar and go downtown, ride the streetcar, these nice little streetcars go downtown, get drunk down there. And there's one bar, I can't remember the name of the place. It was on street level, and they would serve this, they called it Dracula. I don't know what it was, but they actually served it in a test tube. It was really dark, bloody red. It tasted like cinnamon, and it was a guaranteed blackout every time I drank it, and I drank a lot. It was guaranteed blackout. I would drink that stuff because it tasted good. I would never know where I was going to wake up. And there were a lot of times I would wake up sticky, naked, and lost. And there's some girl I don't know, so I'm getting dressed and thanks, see you later, and stumble back to the barracks for a shower and a fresh pack of cigarettes and head over to the mess hall like it's just another day. And I'll never forget. One time that happened. I wake up Sunday morning, I get dressed, say goodbye to whoever she was, and I start stumbling back to the barracks. And I don't know where I am, but Nuremberg's really small. And if the streets are getting bigger, you're moving in the right direction. And if the streets are getting smaller, you're headed to the edge of town and away from the center. So I'm headed for the bigger and bigger streets. And I'm stumbling along with no sunglasses, and it's right outside and just killing me. I noticed that the wall next to me felt really comfortable because it was black. It wasn't reflecting any sunlight. I looked up, and there in some brushed nickel letters was the word Spandau. Spandau prison is where they held the Nuremberg trials. All those Nazi, they were tried and hung right there next to me. I was walking down the sidewalk where my grandfather's generation had walked, had done that business. And at the time, I was hungry. I wanted a cigarette and more beer. I didn't see the connection. I didn't see the history. I didn't feel connected to that. It didn't dawn on me. Oh, look, it's Spandau. Okay, I'm going to go home back to the barracks and do this and that. And as I said, that went on for 2 years like that. Down in the center of Nuremberg, there's a cathedral. When I was there, it was already more than 700 years old. And a buddy of mine had gone down there with me. And it was pretty amazing to see this huge stone building. And we realized that building had been staying there longer than my country had even existed. It had already been there for 700 years before America was even founded. So that's another moment that just was lost on me because I'm going to go find a bar. But anyway, 2 years of that, and oh yeah, I got arrested in Germany, drunk and disorderly. and spent the night in German jail, not sleeping. And my barracks is this long hallway with rooms on the sides. And just inside the entrance of the hallway is a bulletin board, and there was a promotion list. Who was up next for promotion? And my name had been at the top of the list that morning. And I got up the next morning, my name was down at the bottom of the list. I didn't go to, I spent the night in jail, but no other action was taken against me. It said that my name was down at the bottom of the list. And I spent a year watching all these newcomers get promoted over me. And I stayed a private while these other guys made rank over me. So I didn't see any consequences other than I hated these people for, they couldn't just let it go. Who are these assholes being promoted over me? I'd been there longer than I deserved the promotion. But eventually my day came. I rotated to California, and I'd spent 2 years drinking 7% beer and gin, Tanqueray gin. Now that I think about it, my last few weeks in Germany, right before I left, I was always sitting in Jimmy's bar drinking Tanqueray alone. I didn't have any friends. All the guys that I'd known from the barracks, they had other things they wanted to do. Nobody wanted to go drinking with me. So I was in there every Saturday afternoon at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, getting drunk on Tanqueray gin. And yeah. But I get to California, same thing. Unpack my stuff, put it in the wall locker. Hi, I'm here, whatever. Okay, here's where you work, here's your duties, here's where you park the car, whatever. And right outside, it was a place called Fort Hunter Liggett. Somebody named Liggett. And it was an hour drive to get anywhere from that post. It was out in the middle of the desert. It was a testing facility. The Humvee, for example, had been partially tested there. They did cold weather testing somewhere else. But I get there and I finally get some time to myself, and I sit down with a 12-pack of Miller. I drank that whole 12-pack and decided I needed to go get some more. So that's what I did. I drank a 12-pack of Miller and didn't really notice anything. I just kept going. And eventually, a guy named Eric rotated into the company. His mom actually lived up in San Jose, about an hour and a half north. And he's like, hey, I'm going home to get some home cooking. You want to go with me? Sure, we'll go. So Eric and I jump in his car, drive off to meet his mom, get some home cooking, blah, blah, blah. And Eric introduces me to Donna. And I swear to God, it was love at first sight. I'd have done anything to marry her. Anything at all. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what anything was. So I'm drinking and paying for the hotel room, and that's all we're doing. And I'm not talking about the future. I'm not making any plans. I'm just talking about, hey, let's go get drunk and see what happens next. You know, all this time I've just basically been that 12-year-old boy wearing a uniform, making 12-year-old boy decisions and acting on 12-year-old boy instincts. There was no growth. So Donna did the right thing. She cut me loose, and my time in the Army ended. And I didn't know what else to do with myself, so I went back to Michigan. My mom and my sister and my little niece were there. Okay, you can always go back to family. And they didn't want to stay in Michigan, so we moved to Colorado. Moved to Colorado, sit down in front of the TV, waited for our lives to change, and it didn't change. And a year later, we finally came up here to Seattle. Mom went into her jewelry box, took all her best diamonds to a pawn shop, sold her and bought bus tickets, and we came up here. And I just drank every day. I found, I came up here in 90 or 91, found blue collar heaven. Jobs, you could get a job anywhere, anytime. Rent was cheap, freezer full of milk, meat, all the bills are paid. I'm going to go drink. And I became a maintenance drinker every day. Just pay the bills, Dave. Just pay the bills and we're fine. Okay, here's the bills. Now let me go drink. And I met a guy, a neighbor moved in from Montana, a guy named Scott. He, in first meeting, he said, I'm sober. Okay, yeah, dude, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Who drinks at 11 o'clock in the morning? No, I'm in the Alcoholics Anonymous. What the hell is that? It means I don't drink. Okay, fine, you don't drink. I get it. And he says, hey, it's Easter. You want to go out in the woods and shoot guns? Okay, let's do that. So grab the checkbook, lock the door, drive out to the woods and shoot some guns, whatever. He became a really good friend of mine. And eventually he moved out of that apartment. He moved down to Kent, started going to meetings like Horseman's down to a little blue house. Met a guy named Tom. Scott's like, hey, Dave, you should come down and hang out with us. We're having fun. Okay. So I went to Horseman's. I was still drinking. Went to Horseman's right at the tail end when you could walk in there and use the candles to light your cigarette. That ended pretty quickly after that. But Scott was a really, he was a long-term kind of a guy. He thought ahead. And we're all hanging around one time. He said, you know what? We should get a house together. It would help us to save money. And Tom and I were like, yeah, that makes sense. So we all got a house together out in West Seattle. So I'm drinking Red Hook, the greatest beer ever invented. Mm-hmm. Tom and Scott are sober. They're in the program. They're going to meetings. But Scott works nights at a furniture factory, and Tom is working at a photo lab 12 and 13 hours a day. So I've got the place to myself, so I'm drinking. And finally, Memorial Day, 1998. Tom is home. Tom was told to take the day off. He was ordered to take the day off. And it was Monday afternoon. Tom says, I found him in the kitchen. He says, hey, I'm going to a meeting. Do you want to go? Not really. I mean, why would I go? Because there's hot chicks there. You're driving. So we go to Drunks R Us out in Fremont. There you go. And there were over 100 people in that meeting that night, Monday night. And I sat there with Tom, next to Tom. And one by one, the format was to share a guy, a girl, a guy, a girl. They would take turns, men and women, men and women. And men and women, one after the other, they talked about how I felt inside. They talked out loud what I was feeling inside. The shame of having walked next to Spandau and not seen the significance. The death and horror that had gone through that building. They talked about the death and the horror in their lives. The shame of having been abused. The guilt of broken relationships. They talked about the stuff out loud. And what shocked me was that there were so many of them. What you said made sense. It was common in my life, but to see so many people in the same place talking about the same thing, couldn't believe it. It was shocking. So the meeting ended, and Tom and I would go up the stairs. As soon as we get outside, light a cigarette, Tom says, that classic line, so what do you think? And I stopped dead in my tracks and I said, Tom, I will murder people to get back here next week. I don't care. I will murder people to get back here next week. Okay, Dave. And so 3 meetings later, 3 Mondays later, I found a guy. I asked the guy to be my sponsor. And he said, okay, we'll meet you on Friday at the Bauhaus Cafe. And I said, oh, I'll do it. I don't care. I'll do it. But in my mind, I was thinking, really? The Bauhaus? I picked a freaking hipster for my sponsor. All right, fine. So I go to the Bauhaus. I get a really, like a 3-day-old piece of carrot cake. And there's Ryan with his little suede hipster backpack. We go upstairs and sit down in this dingy little corner. He opens his book. And the two famous questions. Dave, do you drink when you don't want to? And I said, yeah, Ryan, I drink when I don't want to. I do it every day and I don't want to. And he says, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Now, when you start drinking, can you stop when you want to? I said, no, I can't. When I start drinking, I cannot stop. I'd mentioned that I really enjoyed Red Hook. It was a microbrew that's no longer in business. About 2 weeks before Tom invited me to that first meeting, I was sitting at home alone, watching TV, eating a box of mac and cheese, and I had half a glass of Red Hook on the table next to me. I drank from a glass, not a bottle. And the program ended, and I thought to myself, I'm going to clean my plate, pour out that beer, and go to bed. And I turned and I looked at that beer, and I knew I had to drink it. I knew I was not capable of just pouring it out. I had to drink it. So Ryan asked me, do you stop when you want to? No, I don't. And then the third question, which saved my life, Dave, do you want help? And I said, yes, I will do anything. I will, whatever you say, I'll do it. I don't care. Yes, I want help. Okay, Dave, start going to meetings. Here's my address. Here's my phone number. We meet at my place and we'll start doing the work. And he took me through the first 164. I did a fourth step. I did a fifth step. I did all the steps. And he was right. Tom, by the way, was right. There were some pretty girls there that night. And I spent my first year of sobriety with my eyes closed because I knew that staring at the pretty girls would not help me. But I also realized very quickly that if I closed my eyes and I listened to the women speaking, I could hear the dignity and resilience and the recovery that my mother never achieved in her life. I could hear women succeed. I heard the sound of a female voice that deserved to be heard. I found a female voice could say something loving and caring and nurturing. So I gladly closed my eyes to hear that. But right after a couple of years at that house with Scott and Tom, Scott decided he was going to buy a condo. And hey, you dudes should buy condos. I'm buying a condo. You should buy condos. We should buy condos. Like, yeah, you're right. So I bought a condo. 2 minutes left.
2 seconds.
Oh my God, I'm not even halfway through. Okay, well, in the short time I've got left. Oh my God. During my recovery, during my sobriety, I had about 15 years of sobriety. And I wasn't getting what I thought I wanted from the program, so I stopped going to meetings. And about 4 years later, my mother was diagnosed as an Alzheimer's patient. So the woman who had abused me as a child was now my patient. I was her caregiver. And I spent 6 years caring for the woman who had abused me. And in the end, I didn't see the woman who abused me. I saw a human being with dignity who needed to be safeguarded. So that's what I did for 6 years. I safeguarded her humanity and her dignity. But after 10 years with no sponsor and no meetings and no contact with the program, after 6 years of watching her die a little bit every day, I nearly lost my fucking mind. So I got back to meetings. I got a sponsor right away, as quickly as I could. I did another fourth step, did another fifth step. and finding freedom that I'd heard about that first meeting. There's a lot more to my story, which I would love to share. Because, like you, our stories always contain hope. You know, bad things happen, okay? But I didn't drink. And I was lost in the woods for a while, but I found my way back here sober. I was gone for 10 years and I didn't drink. I held on to that feeling I had when Ryan, my first sponsor, asked me if I wanted help. I held on to that, knowing that if I drank, all that grief is going to come back to me. So I wish I had more time with you. I just love to share my story. I want you to know who I am. I want to stop isolating. And I could stand here all night coming up with one more thought. I'm sorry. What's that? Okay. So thanks for my time, and I hope to see you again and share more of my story.